Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Automating Your Workflow with Akamai for DevOps. First and foremost, thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to join us today. My name is Jessica Mills, and I'm a marketing manager on the developer relations team here at Akamai. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone sees the Q&A module that you have on your screen. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll have time at the end to answer as many as we can. If for any reason we don't have time to answer your question, we'll make sure we follow up with you directly. You'll also see a green icon on the bottom right of the toolbar. If you select that, you can find additional DevOps resources. All right, let's get started. I am very excited to introduce Davey Shafik, our developer evangelist, and Sid Podkar, our product manager. Sid is going to start us off with an overview of Akamai for DevOps, and then we'll dive into the Akamai CLI and Terraform. Sid, I'll hand it on over to you.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar. We are super excited that so many of you are on the call, and really, this is an exciting time for us as a company at Akamai, as we are in the process of building our next generation CDN for today's user. We believe that our users today have needs that are very different from users even 5 years back, and DevOps is a big reason for those different needs. And so over the course of this webinar, we are hoping to do two things. One is to show off our commitment to this new user, but secondly, also just to make it more real by showing off some of the cool things we've been working on. Like Jess said, feel free to keep your questions coming. We'll answer them as they come, but don't be afraid, don't be shy to ask questions. So before even getting to the DevOps part of it and what we want to talk about today, a real quick 2-minute history lesson for anyone out there who might be new to just the CDN world. Akamai as a company has been around since the beginning of the internet. We were the ones, we introduced the entire concept of dynamic real-time content delivery to the world, and even today our global scale is absolutely unmatched. Think of CDNs as the infrastructure on which the internet stands. In fact, today 30% of the internet traffic goes through Akamai. So I personally am on the East Coast. I'm based in Cambridge in Massachusetts. If you're in the same time zone as I am, there's a 96% chance that you interacted with Akamai before this webinar happened sometime today. So again, in terms of global footprint and match, we have we have some unmatched footprint, and our scale extends everywhere. We've got performance capabilities that cater to today's users and locations all around the world. In fact, if we have about 200,000 locations around the world today. And in fact, if you want to spin up even a business in Antarctica today, we'll have you covered. But again, the thing we want to talk about today, and I want to talk about the genesis of this, is why we are so excited about where we are going as a company. We've got a lot of different solutions in the market today. We've got performance solutions for our CDN users, media delivery solutions, cloud security, cloud networking, network operations solutions, different solutions. But the genesis of what we are doing with this particular effort is to enable our users to be a lot more comfortable in their workflows. As a company, we definitely want our users to be competitive in their industries. And compared to your traditional CDN user who would come to us, work in our portal, we want this new user to work in their environments, in their speeds, with their tools. And so we want to enable the workflows that those users have to make them as automatable, fast-paced as possible. And so everything we talk about in this webinar today is going to be focused on that. So again, before getting into the crux of what we are talking about, let's talk about DevOps itself. The big question that always comes up every time I have a DevOps conversation with anyone is, what the heck is DevOps? Every single customer, Akamai employee, friend, family member I've ever talked to has a different answer to this. But really, the big picture is everyone is trying to solve the same problem. They're trying to go faster in their own environments with their own set of tools and expect Akamai or any other CDN just to be another component that snaps within their architecture. So again, really high level, everyone is trying to solve the same problem. The complexity and all of the confusion that comes out of DevOps comes out if you go one level deeper. Personally, I've spoken to about 50 customers over the last 3 months, and I've gotten 50 different answers on what their workflows are, how they want CDNs to integrate in this, what they expect out of a CDN. But again, big picture is the same. So let's look at our traditional CI/CD pipeline. As a developer, forgetting CDNs, forgetting Akamai for now, think of any other piece of code that you're developing in your CI/CD pipeline. As a developer, you want to start planning and start doing some development work. As soon as maybe you're using a Git repository to source control some of your code, as soon as you check something in, you want to kick off a build, test this out, release it, maybe provision it via Terraform, spin up a EC2 instance, deploy it in the cloud, then monitor whatever change you put out, monitor this real time. And then depending on what you think of the results out there, you want to either make some more changes, fix this, or continue working. The entire CI/CD workflow focuses on just the DevOps user going a lot faster and automating this particular workflow. And so really, our goal in this presentation is to kind of hit upon how do we enable as CDNs are integrated into these workflows, as the DevOps user looks to integrate Akamai into their workflows. We look at 3 big buckets that we are developing a lot of our products on, have things out in the market today that this touches upon. Automation, so again, being more efficient with your workflows. Monitoring, so just validating everything real time. And then edge logic, so just operating at the edge, a lot more efficiently. As we go through this webinar, you'll notice that there are some things out there that appeal to you a lot, some things out there that may or may not appeal to you, and some things you might not even care about. But really, that is one of the key things over here is that as a DevOps user, your needs might be a lot different depending on what kind of environment you have today. So going back to the CI/CD pipeline that we have today, imagine you're a developer going through this. You have a Git repository where you're storing all of your code. You have a Jenkins job running in the background that's kicking off some automated builds and tests, maybe even doing some pre-production packaging and releasing. Let's say you're using Terraform to provision a lot of your architecture, a lot of your instances. Let's say you're using Splunk to monitor some of your logging. This is kind of a typical DevOps savvy workflow that we have observed in the market today. As a company, we have a lot of different solutions that are focused on this today. But what we've been doing over the last year is doubling down our efforts on this. And so we've got a lot more coming in the market. A lot of the ones in pink you see in here are either present today or coming at our big conference in Edge in 2017, October of 2017. So for those of you on the call, this is also a sneak peek at our Akamai Edge conference happening October. And as I go through this webinar, I'll give a high-level overview of what each one of these solutions is, and then Davey is going to run a couple of demos around just making this a lot more real. Again, the 3 categories that we want to hit upon are automation, monitoring, edge logic, and so let's start off with automation. One of the big things as a company that we've been doing is we have this initiative called API for Everything. Essentially, the goal is that anything that you can do in the Akamai portal today, that should be doable via APIs, via your command lines, a lot more programmatically. What this enables is you have a lot more programmatic control over your Akamai environment. And so today we have APIs for a lot of different things. Secure provisioning and identity management, global traffic management, our GTM solution, Fast Purge is a Fast Purge which just went GA earlier this year, and then some networking and DNS diagnostics. And so let me use Fast Purge as an example of just how this plays out internally within Akamai. Today, our Fast Purge solutions that lets users purge all of their content in less than 5 seconds went GA earlier this year. The goal, even as we were developing this solution, was yes, we need a UI interface for this, but everything we do in the UI should happen via APIs as well. And so again, as we develop more capabilities to our Fast Purge functionalities, Fast Purge by CP codes, if any of you are heavy Akamai users and use CP codes, you can use Fast Purge by CP codes, which goes GA Monday, this coming Monday, and then Fast Purge by cache tags that lets you group a lot of your content together and purge it. That goes beta. That's currently in beta, but all of those capabilities are available via APIs. Kind of doubling down on that, the big API that we really are focusing on in terms of completely enabling our users is our Property Manager API. What this enables is that anything that you can do in the Luna portal on your Akamai config, now you can do it programmatically. So as a DevOps user, I can now use my Property Manager API to download my config as code, check this into my GitHub repository, make a bunch of changes. When I'm ready, I can commit those changes, run a Jenkins job in the background that that triggers off a bunch of different triggers. And so you could do anything. You can treat Akamai as just another piece of code. And this is something we are super excited about, something that just became generally available in June. So if you haven't played around with it, definitely play around with it. Again, big goal behind this thing is so Akamai can seamlessly integrate into your automation workflows. The Property Manager API has a couple of really cool functionalities too. So Property Manager variables are those things that let you parameterize your environment a lot more. So essentially what this means is it enables you to have more simplified configs, less rules, less behaviors. You can start automating a lot of your redirects and things like that, a lot more flexibility. So again, something that really helps you with automation. Something else related to to the Property Manager API that we've been developing is called custom behaviors. So custom behaviors is this advanced functionality wherein traditionally, if you have a professional services team at Akamai, they would go in, build some kind of advanced functionality for you in your config, and you could use this. Now, the challenge was every time you spun up a new config, you had to recreate this whole thing. You had to go back to professional services, have them make those same changes on another config, and then work with that. With custom behaviors, we let you templatize a lot of these configs. So now once you have one template, you can now start reusing this template across your different configs. So you can move your configs, edit them, copy them between, copy that advanced metadata between configs, do a lot more things. Essentially saving you on a lot of resources, saving you on a lot of costs, on a lot of time. So again, something else that we are super excited about. Custom behaviors is in beta today and will be generally available at Edge next month. Akamai CLI is one of our core DevOps users functionality that we've been really focusing on. I'm not going to get into this too much just because Davey is going to talk about this a lot more, But think of Akamai CLI as the wrapper around a lot of our APIs. Today, we want to give you two possibilities. One, we build our APIs flexibly so you can start doing all kind of tweaks and different things and make it as customizable as possible. Or sometimes all you care about is a simplified, abstracted wrapper that just says Akamai CLI, activate property, and this activates a property. So really, that is Akamai CLI is our effort towards making almost an SDK-like wrapper around our APIs, so your learning curve is a lot less and you can use Akamai a lot more effortlessly. This is actually open source, as Davey will talk about, and we'll point you to the link to play around with it right after. Now, automation goes hand in hand with speed. Speed is very important as the DevOps users, you aren't the traditional user who makes one or two changes every 6 months. Today, our users expect to make multiple changes every day, and so we've had a big focus on speed as well. Our activations have gotten a lot faster. So if you were using activations about a year back, it would typically take 45 minutes to an hour to activate a property. Today they take about 10 minutes, and as part of and at Edge, we are going to give you the ability to start validating your changes even faster. You can start doing this in about 5 to 6 minutes. One of the big feedbacks that we get from our customers is, yes, activations are important, but the ability to revert back changes is even more important if something goes wrong. So something else that's coming out in October is fast fallback, which lets you revert back your changes in about a minute. And really, all of these APIs would be useless if you didn't have a way to interact with them. So we have this focus on enabling our users to work with our APIs in languages or syntaxes that are familiar for them. So we have different libraries, Perl, PHP, Python, Node.js, all of these. Again, highly recommend you checking them out. And we have a bunch of different integrations too. We recognize that as a CDN user, Akamai isn't the only component within your architecture. You've got to do a bunch of other infrastructure. You have a bunch of other infrastructure-related needs, and so we have an effort to kind of help plug into your other tool sets as well. So we have a Varnish plugin that's already generally available. We have a WordPress Purge plugin that's in alpha mode today. And then Davey is going to run you really quickly through our Terraform provider plugin. Again, won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but something super exciting because super exciting, and we'll have a demo of this later on. The important part for the DevOps user with automation is, yes, we are putting out a lot of changes every day. And so what that does is it introduces, sometimes the risk of introducing errors is higher. And the thing we've found with customers is you are completely okay with these errors as long as you have some kind of an ability to monitor this real time. And so there's this focus within the company on our monitoring solutions today as well. Impulse is our solution that's focused on real user monitoring and business insights. Essentially, everything that you do at the back end with Akamai, every tweak that you make, Impulse helps you tie this into some kind of real user perspective. So my time to first byte went up. What does this mean in terms of click rates? What does this mean in terms of revenue generation opportunities on my website? So something that is generally available to everyone today, so definitely check it out. Cloud Test is our effort to enable users to do continuous integration within their load balancing solutions. So Cloud Test enables you to help understand peak load performance a lot earlier in your CI/CD lifelines. And then another solution that we are coming up with at Edge, again in about a month now, is Data Stream. This will go beta at edge, and essentially this will enable you to get a lot of real-time insights and aggregated stats from your edge data. Super, super excited about this one because it really enables two things. One is, as a DevOps user, I want to understand what kind of stats I'm looking at around my response rates, around my traffic volumes. And I either would want something that just plugs into the raw logs, or I want to get a lot more summarized view so I can make sense of these stats real time. And Data Stream will enable you to do both things. It's going to be our initial beta product is going to be an API only product, and two features that we have in there that we are really stressing on are data governance and retention. So as these logs are generated, you have the ability to plug in and start getting this data right away. So if you have logs in there that you only need for the next 24 hours, you can completely ignore these. You don't need to put these in your Amazon S3 cloud instances or anywhere. So we have data retention in there that helps save you a lot on our costs. And then we have more monitoring solutions around SIM integration. So this is our solution for security insights. So something like SIM integration can just plug into your Splunk logs and give you real-time security insights. And finally, we've got our solutions around just making your operations at the edge a lot more efficient. So we don't want to forget about our mobile users. So we have a lot of mobile SDKs that we are using. We have ESI, which again, if you're a heavy Akamai user, ESI has been something that's been around for 10 years. Reminder of that, but we are focusing on modernizing this as well. We just released a modernized ESI test server in a container that's open source. We'll give you a link to our DevOps website, but you can go check it out, play around with it over there as well. We've got a lot of cloudlet solutions. So if you have specific DevOps efficiency needs around maybe something like edge redirecting, or maybe you want to start phasing out your releases, maybe around application load balancing, we have specific functionality that's aimed at doing that. So cloudlets is again something that we've been focusing on just specific functionality at the edge. So again, I know I spoke about a lot of this, and I do want to have save time for Davey to really get into the substance of this and run you through his demo. But just a reminder, these are all of the solutions that we have in the market today. Key takeaway here is just our commitment to the DevOps users. This is only a first step for us. We have a multi-year roadmap around the DevOps user. So stay tuned in this area. We'll have information on how you can stay tuned at the end of this webinar, but a lot more coming up in this space. And Davey, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So as Sid said, I'm Davey, developer evangelist at Akamai, and I am responsible for a lot of the coding that's going on around the DevOps integrations that we're creating, and that also includes Akamai CLI. And so Akamai CLI is a toolkit that you are able to assemble using the Akamai command to enable you to use different functionalities and products of Akamai from the command line and fulfill common use cases as easily as possible. So right now we have 3 different packages available. The first one is for property configuration. That's Akamai CLI for Property Manager. We also have Fast Purge, so you can do purges from the command line in under 5 seconds. It's very quick. And just last week we put out our third package, which is Akamai CLI for visitor prioritization. So if you're using visitor prioritization, you can now do things like change your balancing and throttle thresholds from the command line very, very quickly. But most importantly, Akamai CLI is extensible. So as Sid mentioned, we support 9 different languages, and you can extend Akamai CLI using any of those. So that would be Golang, PHP, Python, Perl, Ruby, JavaScript, Java, C#, or even PowerShell. And we support the standard package managers for those for most of those languages to automatically install dependencies. So if you're using Golang, we support the Glide package manager. We have PHP and Composer, Python and Pip, Ruby and Bundler, and lastly, we support NPM or Yarn for JavaScript. And we're also working on, right now, working on Java with Maven. And we'll be looking at C# and NuGet as well after that. So I want to run you through a demo of Akamai CLI so you get a feel for what it brings to the table. And hopefully you'll go ahead and download it when we're done. So just a reasonably quick demo, and I'm just going to run you through some of the functionality that's available there. So the first thing that you'll want to go ahead and do is actually install Akamai CLI, which is really simple. So it's written in Golang. It is a compiled static binary, and so you just need to download it, and you can execute it directly. So you're going to go ahead and go to the Releases tab at github.com/Akamai/CLI, and at the top you'll always see the latest release, and you're just going to go ahead and download whichever release is applicable to your platform. So in this case, I'm using a Mac. And then we're going to switch over to our terminal, and if you are using Mac or Linux, you're going to need to change the permissions to make it executable. So we move into our Downloads folder, and then we're going to use the chmod command to just make that binary that we downloaded executable. On Windows, you just get an exe, and it's immediately executable. So the next thing that we're going to do is actually execute Akamai CLI for the first time. And as you can see, we detect that it is your first run and that Akamai CLI is not currently located in your path, and we'll help you relocate that. So if you choose yes, you'll be given a list of paths that we can install to. You can pick one and it will install. The next thing is it will ask if you want to do auto updating. So we support auto updating of the CLI itself. And essentially what this will do is at most once a day, whenever you run Akamai CLI, it will go ahead and check if there is a new release. And if there is, it will ask if you want to upgrade. I recommend that you turn this feature on so you always have the latest version, but only in environments where you are actively interacting with it. So obviously not in unattended environments, like if you're scripting it. So once you have got this completed, Akamai CLI will be available anywhere in your system, and it will always be up to date. So let's start by exploring Akamai CLI. So the first thing that we're running here is Akamai Help. And Akamai Help is really the key to allow you to explore Akamai CLI and discover the functionality and features that are available within it. So we can essentially call Akamai Help followed by any of the other commands that are available. So in this case, we have Akamai Help List. And you can see we get a short description of that and an example of how to call it. The help command also allows you to explore subcommands as well. Now, the next command we have is Akamai List, and this will show you a list of currently available commands. And this is important because you can actually install further packages, as we mentioned, using Akamai Install. So let's start by installing Akamai CLI for Property Manager. So Akamai Install Property. This will automatically clone the Git repository. And as you can see there, it does an install, which is actually calling npm install and is installing the dependencies through npm. And once that's done, you can see the new property command is available, and you can go ahead and use that. Now we can do the same thing with purge. Now in this case, we don't have the Go runtime, so this package is written in Go available, but we've made binaries available. So you can just choose to download one of those. Then we'll go ahead and download that, and once that is done, it will download the correct one for your platform. And as you can see, we now also have purge available. In addition to that, we also have the ability to keep those packages up to date. So we can go ahead and use Akamai Update Property, for example, and that would automatically update that particular command. So obviously, we just installed it. It's already up to date. You can update all commands just by issuing Akamai Update, and it will go ahead and update all of the packages. So lastly, we also have Akamai Upgrade, and that will allow you to do those upgrades to Akamai CLI manually. So in, as I said, non-interactive environments, that would be how you would manage that. And we do like automatic, we have SHA-256 sums to make sure that we're getting the right package, and we're looking at cryptographic stuff as well. So as you can see with Akamai List, we now have 2 new commands. We can also see that in Akamai Help, where it's split out into built-in commands or the install commands. And we can also dive into further help on those using Akamai Help. The way that we call those is just Akamai Purge, for example. We'll call the newly installed Akamai Purge command, and we can now see a full help for that particular command. So this exposes 2 actions, invalidate and delete. And if we go ahead and call Akamai Purge invalidate, and we're going to follow that with the URLs that we want to purge, and we just list as many as we want, or we can pipe standard in as well. So if you have a file, you could pipe those directly into the command, and very simply it purges 2 URLs, and we have an estimated time of 5 seconds. We can also see the same thing for Akamai CLI for Property Manager. So if we just call Akamai Property, then you'll see that we get the information about that. So simple help, and something like Akamai Help Property Create, so we can start to dive down deeper and get more information. So Akamai Help Property Create will give us sub-command, sub-action help information as well. So the idea here is that everything is discoverable through the command line, that you don't need any further documentation. Now, obviously, we have and are working on more documentation, but if you are on the command line, we want to keep you in that environment, and that's it. So you can now start to use Akamai CLI as part of your daily toolkit, or you can integrate it into your DevOps pipeline by scripting it. We fully expect that to be something that you do. Now, Akamai CLI itself, Akamai CLI for Property Manager, for Purge, and for Visitor Prioritization are all available right now in beta. We recommend that you install Akamai CLI as the top level and then use that to manage all the other packages. So the next thing that I want to look at, which I'm very excited about, is the Akamai provider for Terraform. So this is something that we've been working on now for multiple months, and it's now available in alpha, which we'll talk about what that means at the end. But I just want to walk you through what Terraform is exactly and how we fit into this. So Terraform is a infrastructure as code tool. And what it allows you to do is to define a configuration file that describes all of your infrastructure. And it doesn't matter where that infrastructure lives. So it could be partly on Amazon AWS with EC2 instances and ELBs, et cetera. Maybe part of it is on-prem. It could be split across multiple cloud providers. Perhaps you have stuff in Azure as well, for example. And then maybe you're also using other third-party services. And you can describe all of that within your Terraform configuration. And what Terraform does is it analyzes that configuration to determine what is necessary to make that reality. So when you do Terraform apply, what that will do is it will try and see if there is an existing state. If there isn't, then it will just create all of the resources. But if there is, it will try to figure out the minimal amount of changes to make that state reality. So for example, if you have 10 web instances that you've spun up on EC2 and you change the config to make it 15 because you want to scale up, it will see that you already have 10, and rather than create 15 new ones, it will just go ahead and create 5 new ones. Similarly, if you wanted to go down from 10 to 5, it will see the 10 and just remove 5 of them. Now, when it can, it will update resources in place. So for example, if you are scaling your instances and it can do it in place without any interruption, then it will go ahead and do those changes in place as well. So it tries to find the minimum amount of changes possible to make what you've described in your configuration a reality. And what we've tried to do is to bring Akamai into that, so that if you are spinning up, say, for example, EC2 instances, and you want to put them behind an ELB or an ALB on Amazon, and then that is to become your origin, you can now automatically script it so that you can spin up a new property and inject that new dynamic origin, that load balancer, into your Akamai config. So I'm going to walk through the configuration, and you'll hopefully get an idea of how this works. So the very first thing that you do is you need to define the provider config. So in this case, the provider is Akamai, and we need to specify two things. The first thing is the location of the edge RC. This is your configuration file for your credentials, and it's just an INI file. So if you use any of our standard libraries, our signing libraries, you'll be familiar with the edge RC file, but essentially it is a standard INI file with each set of credentials under a header. So it's like square bracket and the name of the section, and then the credentials follow that. And so the second thing that you need to define is the credentials for the particular resources that you are currently working with. So in this case, we are looking at FastDNS. So the provider right now supports FastDNS and Property Manager. We have plans for more in the future, and I'll talk about that towards the end. So we want to specify our FastDNS section, in this case DNS, and that will enable Terraform and our provider to communicate with the Akamai APIs. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a resource, and this is going to be a DNS record. It's called test, and we're going to set the configuration on that. And the first thing we're going to do is set up the host name of going to be under example.com. That's the zone. The name, which is the subdomain. In this case, it's developer, and the type of record. So we're going to create a CNAME. Now, obviously, we want this to be active, so we need to set that to true. And then lastly, we want to set the targets. Now, as I mentioned, this is a CNAME, so we can only have one target. But if it were, for example, an A record or a IPv6 A record, then you would be able to specify multiple targets. And then lastly, we want to set a TTL. So in this case, we're going to set that to 300, which is 5 minutes. So that's FastDNS. And so what will happen is when you run that, it will automatically create or update that record to meet those expectations. The next thing we're going to look at is Property Manager, and this is a bit more involved, quite a bit more involved, but will allow you to create and activate and configure a property from scratch or update an existing property. So the only change here for the provider configuration is that we're setting PAPI section instead of the FastDNS section. So we're using a different API endpoint and therefore potentially a different set of credentials. And then this is the actual resource. Now this is a much longer configuration, but there's obviously a lot more going on for a property. So we're going to set up an Akamai property resource. We're going to call it Akamai Dev. And then we're going to specify some very simple prerequisites. So in this case, the group name, the contract ID, and then a contact, and that's the person who will be emailed whenever the property gets activated. We're also going to set up the public-facing information. So it's going to set up a public host name. So in this case, api.akamaideveloper.com. The network that we want to execute this particular configuration on. So we're going to launch into the production network, and also the CP code to which this particular property is tied. The next thing we need to do is set up our origin. So we use an origin block. We're not using a secure origin in this case, but you could. And then we set up the host name of the origin. So in this case, we're going to just be using developer.akamai.com. So our goal here is that api.akamaideveloper.com will actually be a alias host name to developer.akamai.com/API. So we're just aliasing out that top level directory. And then the last thing we're going to do is set up the forward host name behavior. So in this case, we're going to be forwarding the origin host name as the host header. You could set that to any other host that you want, as well as the public-facing host name as well. And then we get into the most complex part of this, which is the rules with their behaviors and criteria. So as I mentioned, what we want to do is to have api.akamaideveloper.com be a front end, a new property in front of developer.akamai.com/API. So what we need to do is automatically prefix any incoming requests with /API so that they are transparently pushed through to origin that way. So we're going to define our rule block, and inside of that we're going to create a rule. We're going to call it fixUpPath, and the criteria for this is that based on the incoming path, we are going to use the match operator of does not match one of. So we're going to only apply this rule if the criteria are not matched. And obviously what we're looking for is that we don't want to double up the /API. So if you end up hitting a link that points you to api.akamaideveloper.com/API, we don't want to double prefix that. So we're going to only apply it when that is not the case. And then we get to the behavior. So this is the actual changes to the request before they get pushed to origin. So we're going to rewrite that URL, and we're going to prepend it. So the behaviors we're going to prepend with the /API path so that the origin request is prefixed with /API. And we want to keep the query string. So if there is any query string, we want to make sure that that gets forwarded to Akamai as well. And so as you can see, we have complete customizability for the behaviors. The origin that I specified earlier, for example, using the origin block could be specified using this syntax as well. You have full access to the ability to define rules and criteria and behavior. The unfortunate thing that we're still trying to make better is a limitation of Terraform in that you cannot have sort of an arbitrary key value pair. They have to always have the same type for the value. So I'll skip back a little bit here. So there, for example, here we have a string value. So we have value equals does not match one of. For array type values or lists, it's values, plural. You may have also noticed on that last slide, we have flag for Booleans. We also have the ability to set numbers and things like that. We will automatically detect numbers as well when possible. This is a limitation of Terraform. It will also be possible to just simply specify a JSON file, which would hold your property rules directly from PAPI, or to put JSON directly inside of the config just as a string. So these are things that we're looking to do, which gets me to this particular slide, which is that this is alpha. And what does that mean? So this is very incomplete. Everything that I've showed you right now works for the most part. You can currently only create properties. There is no update functionality, mostly because it's very difficult to merge the existing property config with what's specified in the configuration. Like, we want the ability to only specify the parts of the config that you want to specify, and we need to make sure that we don't accidentally delete or remove changes that you haven't specified. We also have more features that we want to add. So right now, as I mentioned, we're focusing on FastDNS and Property Manager. We're looking immediately after at GTM, Global Traffic Manager, as well as cloudlets, and we need to add support for our certificate provisioning service so that you can do TLS certificates, things like that. Now, this is currently available on GitHub. This is an open source project. If you go to github.com/Terraform, /Akamai/Terraform, you'll be able to download our branch there. All of this work is based on the, at the time, most recent stable release of Terraform, which was 0.9.9. There were some major changes to the way plugins work in 0.10, so we're currently updating to meet that. But essentially, you can download this and play with this now. And what we're hoping is to start fostering the community around this and start getting contributions from our customers to build this up. And we are actively working with HashiCorp, who are the creators of Terraform. We are working directly with them so that once this is complete and we get to a level of stability that we're happy with, it will actually be integrated into Terraform itself. And you'll be able to just download Terraform and have Akamai immediately available. So the goal here, as I said, is what you will be able to do is have your origin resources defined, and then very simply define your property configuration, as well as potentially your DNS, and automatically populate that property configuration with variables through the Terraform configuration that reference other parts of your infrastructure. So we're very excited about this. And with that, I will hand it back over to Sid.
Thanks, Davey. That was super, super sweet. Nicely done. So hopefully this was really a sneak peek into what we've been working on, what we have coming up in the DevOps space, what we already have in the market today. So hopefully you found this super useful. But again, I want to reiterate what I said right at the start around this is only a first or a baby step in our DevOps journey. We have a stacked roadmap around the DevOps user, around enabling your use cases, your workflows that we are executing on right now. And we want you to stay as informed as possible, and we want as much feedback as possible from our customers around this. So the way everyone can stay informed on these initiatives, easy way is developer.akamai.com/DevOps is our microsite that we are focusing on all of our messaging, all of our feedback, all of our blog posts around what's coming out, how you can use different things. So definitely stay very much in the loop with that. There's a registration page there. We have Twitter, Facebook accounts if you're interested as well. Follow us on social media, but definitely stay tuned in there because we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. And so we still have about 13 minutes, so we can start hitting on questions if we have any.
Great. Yeah, it looks like we have quite a few questions, so let's get started. So Dan has a question. He's asking about whether, is it correct that the subject of this webinar is more relevant to new features? And is there some sort of upgrade that he needs to get to the automated API solution? Or for example, will the Akamai CLI work with an existing Akamai ecosystem?
Yep, that's a great question, Dan. The goal of our DevOps journey or our DevOps initiatives is all of these functionalities are just base functionalities that should be available to all CDN users. So 90% of what you saw in that webinar is going to be built as base functionality. We are going to be launching it at different times, but it just plugs into your existing infrastructure. The only one I can think of in there that requires an upgrade would be something like Cloudlets, but everything else in there just plugs into your infrastructure. For things like the CLI, go for it, Davey.
So just to clarify, if you have the product itself, you have the API access. And for example, Akamai CLI sits just on top of our same public APIs that everyone is using. So if you have the product already, so for example, if you're using any of our performance products and you have access to Purge and Property Manager, then Akamai CLI for Purge and Property Manager will work.
Yeah, and you could just go to developer.akamai.com/DevOps, get into Akamai CLI, and start using it right away today.
Great. It looks like there are a couple of questions about how data stream compares to Akamai Cloud Monitor.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I'll take that one. That's a good one too. How is data stream different to Cloud Monitor? So Cloud Monitor is our solution in the market today. What does data stream add to that? Three big things I think of when I think of what data stream brings to the table. One is just a much bigger and richer data set. So those summarized stats that you have, that enables a lot less downstream processing for our customers, so you get those aggregated stats right away. It's a data stream compared to Cloud Monitor is a lot more real time as well. So it's going to take less than 10 seconds to get to your customer or endpoint environments. And then volume itself, that's the third thing. All customers are going to have access to these logs, and then we've got even data retention built into this, so you can start looking at that right away.
Good. And David, this may be a question for you. What's the best way to automate fast purge?
So the best way to automate fast purge is actually through the API directly and integrated into your content management system. So we already have one integration for that. So if you are using, for example, WordPress, we do have a beta plugin that is essentially a fast purge plugin. And we are looking at other integrations such as Drupal and Magento as well. But obviously, Akamai CLI is also available, and it's very simple to write a bash script around that. As I mentioned, you can either pipe in a list of URLs, new line separated, or you could put those in a file and pipe those in rather than specify them all in the command line. So we fully expect that to be scripted as well.
Great. Sid, I think this is a question for you. Do we have a Docker container with a fully usable Akamai CLI?
That's actually for me. So yes, we do.
Okay.
If you go to the CLI repository in the README, which is available right at the top level, so github.com/akamai/CLI is the instructions for pulling down the container. Right now, it contains the property and purge commands, and it's very easy, obviously, at that point to add visitor prioritization, and we will be updating it with that shortly.
Okay, great. And next up from Nick, are there any plans for the faster activation to work when there are changes to the property hostname?
Good question, Nick. So today it's on our roadmap. Candidly, it's not going to be available at least for the next year. We are just in terms of priority, we are pushing faster activations for a lot of our other products like Cloudlets, but we hope to have this within sometime towards the end of next year. But again, anytime you have activations that are on a property you've already activated at least once previously, you make use of fast activations.
Thanks, Ed. And Scott is wondering when the Terraform plugin will be generally available.
So right now we're targeting Edge in October for our beta release. And then, unfortunately, the only answer to when it will be generally available is when it's ready. We very much want to ensure that this is as stable as possible, given the capabilities and functionality that it has. What we're trying to do is limit scope to ensure that we can reach stability as quickly as possible. But obviously, it needs to have a certain level of functionality before it's useful. So, as I said, beta for Edge in October, and then the GA will come as soon as we can after that.
Good. And one question: how do we get purge completion notification after purging URLs in the CLI?
So this is actually limited by the API itself. It is actually with CCUV3, it's not actually possible to get the status of a purge. What we recommend is that you actually just use the page that you're purging itself and check, e-tags and cache headers. So obviously, when you're seeing the new page at the edge, then it's been purged.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, this one is one of those things where we went back and forth just internally on should we have a reporting mechanism. We completely expect most of our users to start purging thousands of URLs at the same time. So do we just notify them every 5 seconds or not? Right now, I would assume that if you purge something and you don't get back anything, just assume the purge went through. If something went funky, you'll get some kind of an error message back saying it did go funky.
Good. And how are the permissions or auth handled for the Akamai CLI tools and commands?
So as I mentioned, the edge.rc file for Terraform, we're using the exact same credentials method for Akamai CLI. It is also possible, we're updating all of our libraries to support it, but it'd also be possible to specify those through environment variables. We know that's a very common scenario when automating, especially in the cloud. So mostly it will be through the .edge.rc file, which is that INI file, but for automation, we're looking at environment variables as well.
Good. And Alex is trying our CLI Docker image. It works and it's easier for them to install. Is this a supported, recommended approach?
So it's certainly supported. I don't think that it's necessarily the recommended approach, depending on the environment into which you are deploying. So keeping that Docker image up to date is going to be a little bit slower on our end, just as we have resources to keep it updated. But just actually updating it is going to take a longer process than using the CLI itself. I would personally say that installing it directly will be faster, use less bandwidth, for example, so transfer time becomes an issue. If you are deploying through your CI/CD pipeline, you want that to be as fast as possible. And so I would say Docker is absolutely fine, especially for getting up and running and testing it out. But if you can install it directly, I would recommend that.
And besides Terraform, will we be supporting Chef as well?
So this is the conversation we are having with the folks at Chef. We also, so the short answer is we hope to, as well as Puppet and Ansible. We're also looking at those solutions. We're also looking at, for example, Chef's Inspect project to see if that's something that makes sense for Akamai to be involved in as well in terms of a compliance checking. So it's certainly our goal. In fact, our entire goal with a lot of these projects is to what we say is meet you where you are. So we are looking to integrate with as many tools that you are familiar with as possible to just sort of minimize the learning curve of Akamai and get you up and productive as quickly as possible in an environment that you're familiar with. So short answer, we hope to support Chef in the near future.
Great. And a question talking about the big picture and from a company organization side. What's DevOps?
Yeah, I love that question. This is one where I know most people on this call will recognize that everyone here could get on a philosophical debate around what is DevOps for the next month. The way we are thinking of this, and I think we're on the right path here, is anything that enables our customers or as a user, anything that enables me to release my code fastest without any component in my architecture being a bottleneck, anything that allows me to make my changes, test these out, just push this to production so my customers can start getting those advantages right away, anything that enables those efficiencies is DevOps. So all of our focus areas that we mentioned over here, Davey hit the nail on the head a couple of seconds back when he said meeting you where you are. All of our efforts are focused around making Akamai just another component within your workflows, so your workflows get a lot more efficient, automated, and you can release your production changes faster every day.
Great. Another question from Dan. Are we looking for open source contributions for the various Akamai CLI packages, or will we be supplying most of the main modules?
So the goal here is both. The answer is yes to that, which is kind of both. We are obviously seeding a lot of the things that we feel are most important. We're basing that on what we see our customers' needs are. We're trying to hit the magical 80-20 of meeting 80% of our customers' needs, which is actually about 20% of the work. Obviously we can't meet everybody's use cases. So what we're hoping for is if you have a less common use case, that you will contribute that back. And then, as I said, this is meant to be extensible. This is meant to be something that you build on yourself. So if you have, very specific processes that you want to build, you can do that within the framework that is Akamai CLI. And we hope that, you'll build in a way that is pretty generic and can be open sourced and contributed back to the community. So, yes, bit of both there.
Great. And any plan for the Akamai REST API instead of CLI?
So no plans right now. No specific plans, no.
The Terraform plugin is for Property Manager. David, do you know what other APIs we plan to implement? GTM, WAF, Bot Manager?
Yeah, so part of the constraints here is what we have APIs for. So as I mentioned, GTM is absolutely on our list to look at next. WAF does not have a specific API, and I believe Bot Manager does not either. Excuse me. But essentially, if there is an API or we build an API, eventually we want to support it. We currently have 50 APIs, and obviously even more products than that. So we're focused on this based on customer needs and sort of general use cases. So if you can make a use case for something, and we believe that it has value to a number of customers, then we're willing to look into building that. And I would say that feedback is probably best handled through the GitHub repositories issues. So.
Okay. It looks like we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Is Terraform the long-term solution for automated configuration management of Akamai properties?
So the short answer is no. We want to provide multiple options. So, we see that, Akamai CLI for Property Manager, for example, is complementary to Terraform, is potentially complementary to, say, a Chef or Puppet integration. It's more about providing options, and hopefully, you'll be able to get the same functionality across all of those particular implementations. So as I mentioned, we are looking at this from a use case perspective. Our goal is that, given a particular use case, we will have multiple implementations that result in the same outcome, given the same input. And you'll be able to pick and choose whichever one makes most sense in your environment.
Great. We have time for one more question. Let's end with Sid and Davey. Let me know if you have an answer to this. What's the core spirit of next generation CDN?
The core spirit of the next generation CDN is enabling users to use CDNs as just another component within their architecture. So enabling users to fit anything that they do with their CDNs as just treating that as any other piece of code in their infrastructure, automating it, monitoring these changes real time, reacting quickly to it. That I would say is the core spirit of the next generation CDN.
Fantastic. It looks like we're at time, but anyone who has asked a question that we did not get to, we will follow up with you directly and make sure that you get an answer. You can also check out the developer.akamai.com/DevOps website, and we will be sending a recording of this webinar out to everyone within 1 business week following this. Thank you all again for attending. Dave, Sid, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.